Hello, everyone. We are the Decoding Solar Wind Structure team. This summer, we've been working to better understand solar wind structures using cutting edge tools and unprecedented data. The solar wind is the continuous outflow of particles from the sun into the interplanetary space. Within it, we find a variety of small to large scale structures depending on the sun's conditions. And they all have different properties like speed, density, magnetic field, and more. Solar wind is important because it can cause geomagnetic storms that can affect satellite orbits, communications, navigation systems, and others. It is also the background on which more extreme space weather phenomena propagate. Unless we achieve a good understanding and prediction of the solar wind, we cannot comprehend and predict these severe phenomena as well. The solar wind changes in seconds, producing an ocean of data, now measurable closer to the sun than ever before, that can be analyzed using groundbreaking computational tools and powerful AI models. This let us study solar wind structures at a scale and detail never achieved previously. That's why what we are doing matters, it is important now, and it has not been done before. Therefore, we merge state-of-the-art machine learning with rich, multi-source, unique data to systematically classify solar wind structures, pushing the boundaries of what's possible in heliophysics research. Now, Jasmine will introduce the data sources behind our project.
Thank you, Daniela. So as she mentioned, there's a lot we want to know about the solar wind and how it behaves. This is where we take an interest in one of the most novel spacecraft missions, the Parker Solar Probe, or PSP for short. PSP is one of the main missions dedicated to study the solar wind and its origins. To do so, it measures properties of the solar wind, including, but not limited to, measurements of magnetic field, flow speed, density, and temperature. These are some examples of the in situ observations we need to use in order to identify these solar wind structures that we're interested in. In order to use such data, we did an extensive data preprocessing step to create a PSP ML-ready dataset. This new PSP ML dataset combines measurements from the PSP instruments, including fields, SPC, and span-I, which are then interpolated and ready to be ingested by any machine learning model. Then, using big data preprocessing, quantum ML, and Bayesian analysis, we also analyze PSP parameters to spot invalid data, define accepted ranges, and detect anomalies, enabling smarter choices to train our ML models. Then finally, using these solar wind observations, we compare the PSP preprocessed data with the images observed by the Solar Dynamic Observatory, also known as SDO, to uncover the drivers and precursors of the solar wind structures. Next, Valmir will introduce the approach to decipher such solar wind observations.
Thanks, Jasmine. To make sense of the PSP time series data, we need to check all the parameters depicted here in the time windows. As you can see, it's not obvious how to characterize each part of the time series. With the Cipher pipeline, our new framework methodology, we have been able to characterize each part of the time series in a semi-automated way with a human expert in the loop. The shaded areas here correspond to different solar wind structures. Our method starts with a time window for a given parameter. Then it automatically breaks them and assigns a symbolic index word, and it's showed here in the animation. Finally, using the index word, we can clusterize each part of the selected time series PSP parameter to then classify the entire data set. The cipher operates in 4 stages: compresses the time series, clusters the segments, review results with a human expert, and classify the entire data set. We have the following categories: fast and slow solar wind, and stream interaction regions formed when a fast stream overtakes a slower wind, creating a compression region. Another common event is the coronal mass ejection, when the sun produces a huge burst of plasma and magnetic field into the outer space. Finally, we have switchbacks, events when the magnetic suddenly rotates and changes polarity. Now we created a new SIR and switchback catalogs, and we have also found a CMEs that have not been cataloged before. Now Jinsu will present our classification branch.
Thank you, Barmir. We are using SDO-FM, a foundation model trained on SDO images using Google Cloud TPUs. Foundation model like SDO-FM learn representation directly from the input data. enabling powerful downstream tasks with minimal training. The left portion of SDO-FM corresponds to the encoding network, capable to condense information from the input data, which is stored into an artifact called embedding. Using the SDO-FM encoder from a pre-trained network as backbone, and adding a deep classification network after it, we can classify solar wind structure using less data but achieving higher performance. Our model combines three sources of data: PSP position data, which is encoded with Fourier features, SDO images, and cipher labels. The combined PSP and SDO is fed into the neural field model to classify solar wind structure using cipher labels as ground truths. We trained our entire architecture using Google Cloud 8100 GPUs and DGX server from NVIDIA. Next, Connor will present the classification results.
Excellent. Thank you, Jinsu. Our model was designed to predict the solar wind class at PSP's location using only SDO images of the solar disk. This means it can capture the physics of solar wind generation and propagation across the heliosphere just from pictures of the sun. Our model isn't limited to just PSP predictions, though. By leveraging neural fields, it can study the solar wind anywhere in space. Here, it predicts solar wind types across the solar surface, shown as these colored dots on the sun. Different regions emit different types of solar wind. We can also use our model to zoom out to study the entire heliosphere. Here, the same solar wind types are shown throughout the heliosphere from above the sun. This lets us predict the solar wind impacting Earth or any spacecraft or planet in the inner heliosphere. Our project has produced a great deal of very useful things for the heliophysics community. As part of training our model, we developed a cleaned, labeled, ML-ready data set by combining data from 3 different instruments aboard PSP. We developed the flexible and extensible cipher pipeline that can be applied to any in situ solar wind data. Using this pipeline, we produced a catalog of labeled solar wind data from PSP and Omni, ready for heliophysics analysis. We've dug into the massive volume of PSP data to derive new insights to help heliophysicists better understand exactly what it is that PSP is measuring. And this is, of course, not to mention that we also created a solar wind prediction model based on the SDO-FM Foundation model, ready to be used for science and prediction tasks. Thank you very much for your time and for your attention.